No hunt for treasure would be complete without a treasured home to put it in. Premium properties for premium clients. Coldwell Banker Previews International, a proud sponsor of Find.
Sponsored by the new Ford 500. Its raised cabin design takes the full-size sedan to a whole new level. The new Ford 500, built for the road ahead.
Hi, I'm Lee Kino. And I'm Leslie Kino. Welcome to another episode of Find. Well, today, Alexa takes us on a tour of a modern pied-à-terre inspired by the masters of Art Deco design. But first, we're off to Delaware to investigate a chest of drawers that really got our hearts racing. Oh, yeah. It just may be an extremely rare and valuable piece of Connecticut furniture making. A masterpiece, really, right? It is. Hi. You must be Sharon.
Yes, how are you?
How are you? I'm Leslie.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Sharon.
Nice
Lee.
to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having us here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Now, you sent us a batch of photographs of all these different things you own. And there's one photo of a little clock.
A clock, all right.
Do you have that?
Right over there on the mantelpiece.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw pictures of this. Now, tell us a story about how you got this.
Well, my son, who was in college at the time, he was about 19,
Okay.
bought this box of pieces of junk, which
Okay.
was the clock. It was
In a
all in
box.
pieces in a
Okay.
box.
Okay.
About, probably he paid maybe less than $5 for it.
Less than $5.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he put it together, he got it running.
Okay.
He had to replace the glass.
Okay.
There
well, you
was
know-
no glass left, you know, it
I
was
see.
broken.
Well, you
It
know-
had fallen off the mantelpiece and landed on the floor.
Whoa, that'll break glass. Well, I can see there's no bubbles in it, so it is definitely replaced glass. And you know, this is about 1860, Renaissance Revival. We know that from this little mask and the architectural design of it. It's Walnut, Connecticut, 1880s. Value's probably about $150 to $200 because of the condition. The glass makes a lot of the value.
Of course.
So, still not bad for somebody who paid $5.
No, that's pretty good. That's a good price, right?
Great.
It's my birthday present.
Yes. That's so cool.
Okay.
Now, Sharon, there was a little, I don't know if it was little, I couldn't tell the size. There was
All
a
right.
picture of Washington we saw in the
Yes.
photos. Where's?
It's in my studio in the other room. Follow me,
Okay.
please.
Thanks. Okay.
When I heard you were coming, I got out a bunch of stuff from my mother's cedar chest that has been in the family for a long
Well,
time.
that was nice of you. Thank you. And there's,
This
there's
is
George,
There's
our
George.
first president.
Right. He's been in our family for years, generations.
How did you get it?
Well, it was mothers and her mothers and her mothers.
It's always
and
come down through the family. Well, of course, it's such a famous portrait, let's say, image of Washington. Of course, the one
Yes.
we see on the dollar bill, right?
Yes. Well, it's a copy of the
A
story.
copy of that. And of course, Gilbert Stuart,
Yeah.
as you may know, right? Painted
the original.
the portrait in the late 18th century of George Washington.
Yes.
And it said that they made him look very wooden, and he had his wooden teeth in. But the interesting thing about this is, do you know where this was made? Where this was painted?
No.
Any idea?
No, not at all.
Would you believe me if I told you it was done in China?
No kidding.
Would you ever believe me? Did you ever?
No
Yeah,
kidding.
this is Chinese. It's Chinese export. Gilbert Stuart painted this portrait, which is called the Anthonyum portrait in the late 18th century.
Yeah.
And a gentleman named James Blight, who was an Indian trader, actually took his portrait over to China, okay, and had these Chinese artists start making copies. They were doing it on reverse painting on glass.
No kidding.
It was they were coming over here, and these canvases were coming over here by the dozens, and sold in a Philadelphia shop. actually Gilbert Stuart actually had an injunction against the people selling them because it was copyright infringement kind of thing, right?
Yes, of course.
So it's really, so it's really interesting. He actually said, you're using my image and making these things in China and selling them cheap. I don't want any more of this. So it's an interesting thing. And one of the ways we know this is Chinese is that frame. You see how that tenon's coming through from this upper member? That's a Chinese-style frame. So we know this was made for export in the early 19th century, a portrait of George Washington. Value-wise, any idea? Okay, no guess at all.
No.
Okay, I'd say George here looks like he's had a little bit of in painting, right? A little.
He's been restored.
Would be worth upwards of probably $7,000 to $9,000. Okay. Okay. George would be happy. Speaking of George Washington, you also have laid out for Lee and I this quilt with a picture of George here with Lady Liberty. It says American Independence, 1776. Where did you get this?
It belonged to my family all the way back. It was said to have belonged to Sarah Trowbridge, who was the wife of Major General Artemus Ward, who led the Revolutionary Forces until Washington got there.
Absolutely. Well, this is really a quilt to celebrate probably one of America's greatest heroes of all time, George Washington. But it also has a picture here of Benjamin Franklin, and this wonderful quote about liberty dwells in the heart of our countrymen. And this is English, circa 1810, copper plate print, made for the American market. Now it's a little bit faded, and it's a little bit stained, so it would be worth more if the better condition. It's probably worth about $1,000.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful quilt.
Is there any way to have it cleaned, or do I just leave it as it is?
You know something? There's not much you can do. I would leave it just like this.
Okay.
And I'd leave these just the way they are. They're so wonderful. These little leather shoes. Probably about 1860. We checked with T.T. Halley, who owns Cora Ginsburg Inc., and she's a real expert on children's and women's and men's clothing. And she feels that these are probably French, possibly made for the American market, and worth maybe upwards of $300 to $400. And these are really neat. Cute. Aren't they cute? Aren't they great? Aren't they? And she wasn't sure exactly where these are made, but probably made for our centennial around 1876. Makes sense, right?
I guess so.
Really wonderful. Just really stylish. Probably worth $400.
Okay.
Now, you had a question, I know, about this.
I have a note on it from my mother that said this family story is it was worn at one of George Washington's receptions.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's that old.
Okay. Well, we checked with T.T. Halley, again, a great expert in this area, and this is a beautiful silk lady's bodice. See how it looks on you. And,
very nice.
There you go. Looks great.
Very nice.
And but we know from the style, from portraits of the time, that these puffed sleeves are actually 1830s.
Okay.
So George Washington died in 1799. So we know it wasn't used for that. The interesting thing is, of course, this would have had a lower section.
Yes,
and
naturally.
they didn't have separates back then.
No.
So it would have matched. So it's a little bit like a table missing its legs,
Yes,
So
right.
it affects the value. It's probably still worth about $500, and it's a beautiful piece.
Could it have been a wedding dress, do you think?
It may be.
white?
I don't think there's any way to really know that. But
No.
what's that, Les? Yeah, this is really interesting. And you mentioned Artemus Ward in your letter, signed by him, a letter. Where'd you get this? A family piece?
It's been in the family for years.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, look at that. Well, the thing is, we looked at this before in your letter, and the content of it is not about
The war.
the war. Okay. He was a famous general. It's a family correspondence with his daughter. So the value is probably $300 or $400, but
Fine.
neat document though. Now,
Is that a good way to keep it?
That's a great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would help to have it probably under UV glass, right? So it wouldn't fade at all.
Okay, I
What's
can
the
do that.
story on this?
All right. This belonged to Jonathan Barnes, probably the third,
JB,
but there were 3 Jonathan Barnes in a row, three generations.
Okay, a seal on the gold, probably about 1850 or 60. We checked
Okay,
with Kevin
what's the
Xavier.
third then?
Okay, do you have anything else from the Barnes family?
Oh
or
yes,
any
there's a
other
chest of drawers that's been hanging out in my dining room.
That saw pictures of that.
You saw the picture. Okay, let's go look at the chest. Now this is an old chest of drawers that's been around in my family forever. It was in my mother's house. I got it when she died. It was in her mother's house.
So it's always been in the family.
It's always been in the family, always.
And that was where? What area?
They come from Connecticut originally.
Okay. What part of Connecticut?
Well, my Middletown, Connecticut,
Okay.
and Southampton.
So south of Hartford area, I think that is, right?
Yes, that's right.
I have to tell you, Lee and I looked at the photos of this. And both of us, our hearts started beating a little bit because we're pretty excited about this.
Really?
I have to tell you.
Are you excited that we're excited?
Yes, I am. I certainly am.
Not every day we get to see one of these. This is absolutely from the Connecticut area, and it's probably right from the Hartford vicinity, south of Hartford, for several reasons. And how do we know it's Connecticut? It's made of mostly of cherry wood, which is a native Connecticut wood. You have this series of molding configuration here on the top and on the lower molding, which is very Connecticut. The gadrooned skirt is also typical. You see it in other areas, but mostly in Connecticut pieces, as well as these OG bracket feet.
The feet are great.
What I find really interesting about this is that, in fact, mahogany was fairly sparse with cabinet makers there. So what the cabinet maker did is veneer the drawers with book-matched mahogany veneers, which is, you can see the crotch right in the center of each of the pieces. Just beautiful workmanship. Now, they actually veneered it on a piece of white pine, beautifully cut, right? Very narrow.
Well, they relieved the back, which usually they'd leave it thick, but they actually carved out the back, all this from a solid piece of white pine.
So that little bit of extra work that it actually took a lot more work to carve that out is just great. Now, the finish on this, it looks original.
Yeah, it looks awful.
I'm so glad you never cleaned it or had it refinished.
It looks pretty grungy.
Do you mind if we take out a couple drawers to look at the rest of the condition? Okay, thanks. I'm just going to sneak in here. Oh, look at that. What's that? Are those the locks?
Those are the
original locks that went right here? That's
right.
nice. They look like period 18th century. Don't lose
there's
those.
a key there, too.
Okay, let me take this out. I wanted to look up inside here because we saw in the picture kind of what looked like a patch on the top. So I wanted to look in. Yeah, there's the patch. Did you know it was patched?
No, I didn't.
See that white line, that light color line?
Oh my goodness,
so somebody,
yes.
That was probably a split. Somebody decided to overdo it and fill that in, which is a bit of a hurt. Now, but while we're inside here, I'm also looking at the backboards to replace.
Oh, that does look new, doesn't it?
Yeah, so maybe somebody in your family replaced it with, obviously, with some sort of plywood. But we know what they look like. They would have been just big white pine boards, that's all. Now, the good news about the condition is, as Leslie already mentioned, the finish, but also these poles are absolutely original, late 18th century bale poles with fancy pressed plates.
Pretty special.
You can see where they've been bumping against there for 200 years. Let's look at the backside, Les. Let's look in here. Yeah, looks good. Looks like a couple washers in there, but the original posts and nuts. So all that's real good. Great. Why don't you put the top drawer back in and
that's a good
take
idea.
a look. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is, and it makes such a difference to collectors, are proportions. And this has perfect relationship between the height, the width, and the depth with this beautiful serpentine front. It's just a lot of movement. It's sculpture. It's like, it's the 18th century version of, this was the guy that made this was our version of a great European sculpture that would have worked in the 18th century. So, what do you think, Lee, in terms of value?
Well, let me ask you. Can we ask you? What idea do you have about that?
Absolutely none.
None. No idea.
No.
Do you want to take a guess?
It's just been in the family for years.
But how about a wild guess?
I couldn't begin to.
Okay.
$1,000?
$1,000.
You've never had it appraised?
No.
Okay. For all the reasons we talked about, it really has, in a lot of areas, it's a 10. You know, even with the little strip replaced in the top and the backboards, we would insure this.
Okay, wait, Les. Let me get a chair. Excuse me. Sit. Sit. Here's a chair. Please sit. Well, all set.
We would insure this if I were you. If we were you for $70,000.
Are you glad you're sitting? You had no idea?
It's a beautiful chest.
17.
Not 17.
No,
70.
70,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a beautiful
goodness.
piece.
Yeah. Our chests are pretty puffed up, too. We're excited.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I'm sure glad you pulled up that chair for Sharon. You know, I was afraid she was going to pass out when she heard how much that chest was worth.
So was I.
Yeah, she was only off by what? $69,000?
That's all
I'd
right.
say she was a little surprised.
So, Lexa, tell us what you have up for us.
Well, today I check out a pied-à-terre done by Ernest de la Torre, a top designer whose work you saw last year in the Hamptons Designer Show House.
Yeah. Sure, right.
Yeah. His interiors are often inspired by the French Art Deco masters, and this apartment is no exception. It's all about clean lines and subtle luxury in every detail. Look at this. Shirley, one of Manhattan's storied locations, Central Park West, right under the shadow of the new Time Warner Center. Now, if you were lucky enough to find an apartment floating here like this, and you had the good sense to hire interior designer Ernest de la Torre, then this could be yours. Hi, Ernest.
Hi, Alexa.
I love this apartment. You have to tell me what it was like when you got your hands on it.
Well, it was brand new construction, and it really had to be taken back down to the bones to get all the details right.
So everything gone?
Everything gone. The ceiling, it jutted down in 2 different places, so it didn't really make sense. We leveled it all out to put all the lighting and the speakers and whatnot, and then I created this niche here for the light.
This is fantastic. It looks like an elevator descending from the sky.
Yeah, I love it. And we leafed the niche in white gold so it glows at night.
I love that detail, and I love all of the details. This is really one of the most refined apartments we've seen because everything looks thought out and hand-picked, from rugs to this sofa.
Hand-picked and custom-made for the client.
Right.
The client really wanted, he wanted comfort, he wanted modern lines, but he really wanted the comfort that comes along with feather and down cushions.
And beautiful textures.
And beautiful textures.
I noticed this shagreen, and then your chenille, and then I love this. What's this material?
This is end-grained oak.
It is?
A simple material, but it looks luxurious when you apply it like this, and it's on top of oil-quenched steel. Really adds texture to the room.
So in an austere place like this, all of those details count to
Absolutely.
the bitter end. I mean, down to things like these wonderful pocket door pulls.
Yes, I custom designed these so that they would be as minimal as possible and yet be very functional.
Easy to use.
Absolutely.
So what is this room we're closing off with these pocket doors?
This is the media room. It's a room for the client to get away to retreat from New York.
And retreat from the light into a darker space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I achieved that darker effect by applying this on the walls.
Cowhide?
Yes, calfskin.
Calfskin.
It's beautifully soft, and in this size hide that dictated the squares on the walls.
All right, so we have in this room calf's skin.
Cashmere. I mean camel hair.
Camel hair.
Coyote.
Coyote and cashmere.
And knit cashmere.
And then this wonderful shag rug.
Long-haired sheep from Greece.
It's such an interesting mix. And I love this material too. What is this cabinet for?
This cabinet is made to look like a piece of furniture, but it actually recesses back into the wall another 15 inches to house all the stereo equipment and TV equipment. And it has a flat screen television in it as well.
Look at that. So you've really used every last square inch available to you.
Absolutely. In New York, every square inch is important.
It's true. And I see this cabinet when I first walked in. I know you must have some ingenious use for it too.
Absolutely. The client had one requirement that he wanted a bar near the entry.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes, I think he wanted to be able to give his guests a drink and sit them down.
Well, yeah, first things first.
Absolutely, but I didn't want to see a bar by the entry, so I created this cabinet, and when you open it up, you do see a wonderful bar, and it's beautiful to look at on the inside as well with this clouded onyx base here.
So right in from the door and you get your drink.
Absolutely, that's the way to live.
And that is some door.
Yes, the door, this room.
It's like a Rubik's Cube.
It is absolutely a cube. It had a lot of different necessities that required the way the architecture ended up being. And I wanted to accent although there are several doors in this room, I wanted to accent the front door with the Santos rosewood on it and framed with this nickel frame here. And then we had the requirements of the ceiling. There's a lot of ductwork up there. And so we had to have an access panel, so I made the ceiling in this Corellian burl with an onyx disc in the center.
You can't tell at all.
And you can't tell that there's an access panel. And then it's mimicked here in the terrazzo floor with the zinc inlay.
It's beautiful. But okay, these other doors.
The other door, there's one right there.
Are they coat closets? Are they?
The powder room, coat
Not
closet.
a coat closet.
No.
This is phenomenal. Look at this. It's so dramatic. Look at this huge block.
Absolutely. That's a solid block of silver travertine from Spain. It took quite a few men to get it in here.
And this granite?
Absolute black granite there in the back. And then there's a reveal there for the neon strip.
Yeah, right through here.
Which flows into the...
this wonderful curved ceiling.
Yeah, actually curved because there was a pipe right there and we didn't know what to do with it. So we curved the ceiling and made it an element of the design.
Ingenious. All right, well, I've seen the public spaces. Now I want to see the private spaces.
Well, I think if you push on this panel over here, we'll enter the private spaces.
Okay.
Great.
Ah, this is pretty.
Here's the private space. Starting with a gallery, we have special gallery lights and gallery hanging rods so that you can interchange the art. This is by Paul Himmel, Vogue artist from the 1960s. And here you go into the foyer for the master bedroom.
I recognize this, a famous De La Torre wooden jewel box.
Exactly. Wanted to create a beautiful box as a gallery entry to the room. And this is all English sycamore. And these were all doors before, closet doors, so I wanted to make them panels. And this one hides my favorite part of the closet, which is that I backlit it so that you could see your clothes.
Now, clearly the people that live here are not mere mortals. They're far too tidy.
They are very tidy, but this is also pied-à-terre, so they don't have a lot of stuff.
I feel marginally better.
Yeah, so do I. And here you have the master bedroom.
Where did this start?
Well, it was a pretty difficult room to deal with. There was no bed wall. There was just a short wall here that you really couldn't put a big bed against. Don't ask me how they decided to do that. So I made this larger wall, and it's covered in suede, and it's framed in English sycamore.
You love your natural materials, don't you?
Absolutely. I think it influenced the 1920s artists that influenced me.
Sure.
And I think the reason I like it so much is it adds texture and warmth to modern design, so it doesn't feel stark and cold.
And it wouldn't feel stark and cold. Look, we have our uncharacteristic piece of pattern in here. This is beautiful.
Absolutely. This is a Japanese kimono. And yeah, it's actually cut up kimono. And I thought the pattern was unique, and the colors were wonderful.
Yeah, the palette is perfect for the room.
Yeah, it is. I love
As is this piece. And I love that you put the TV on the wall. I just think you've got to do it. We just all have to face it.
Absolutely.
But this, I'm assuming, cabinet beneath it is housing the equipment.
Yeah, I always feel the TV becomes the focal point of the room, sort of like the way a fireplace was before, and you need to make the cabinet beautiful. You're going to be looking at it, so you have to concentrate on the materials.
Most aren't, and certainly most aren't half as beautiful as this piece.
Thank you. I concentrated on the materials for this when I custom made it. This is ebonized mahogany, this is bronze, and this is horsehair with a custom bronze pull and a bronze foot on the piece. I think it's just beautiful to look at.
And it goes with the suede and the raffia and your kimono and this beautiful screen.
Yeah, this is actually, even the antiques in this room have texture. This is all tiny pieces of English sycamore that have been stained and inlaid into this pattern.
And it's an antique?
It's antique 1930s France.
Oh, it's beautiful. And I think that must be its other antique in the room.
It is. This is a desk by Raymond Soubs.
From the same period?
From the same period. And we did some restoration to it, but the parchment's beautiful. And I contrasted it with this Han and Tang Dynasty pottery to add some texture, even more texture to the room.
And did you build this niche?
This was a closet before, and the client didn't need the space but wanted a desk in the room, so I built it out into this niche.
You did a lot of work in this
We did a lot of work.
How long did it take you to do?
Well, about 3 months in the planning and about 6 months to build.
Oh, you know, that's not that long.
No, some people would laugh and say you could build a house in that time.
Right.
But in a New York apartment where you have to deal with details and you have to deal with your neighbors down above and below, it's not that much time.
And people don't realize that small spaces sometimes have much more difficult puzzles to solve, and you've seemed to have solved them. As we saw your work in Southampton, and it was beautiful there, and it is just beautiful here.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
You know, Les, that place gave me some ideas for my apartment. You mean white gold trim in the bathroom? No, a bar in the entryway. Okay, just kidding. Well, join us next time as we head back to Delaware to visit a collection of pieces that have all the bells and whistles. How long have you had them?
I've had them for as long as I can remember.
And we see how a top designer uses his client's collection of Murano glass and his client's favorite color, Tiffany blue.
I must compliment you on this particular shade.
That's an exact match.
To create a look that's only rivaled by the view outdoors.
This is a glass collector. She likes collecting glass. So.
Well, and speaking of glass, here we have this magnificent view. You just can't get away from it, night or day, and it in the living room, in the dining area.
It's a beautiful view. It's a 180 from Central Park all the way to the river. It's wonderful.
Until then, I'm Leslie Kino. And I'm Lee Kino. And you've just watched another episode of Find.
If you would like to have the Kinos visit your home, send us an email and your pictures to find@pbs.org and show us what you've got. or write to Find-TV at the address on the screen.
There are those who search for hidden treasures, while others hunt for the right homes to put them in. Coldwell Banker is a proud sponsor of Find.
Sponsored by the new Ford 500. Its raised cabin design takes the full-size sedan to a whole new level. The new Ford 500, built for the road ahead.
We are PBS.